Hello, Texans. I'm Susanna, and this is the Susanna Gibb Show. On this show, we feature Texas artists, entrepreneurs, and trailblazers. And last week, we took a deep dive. We went down and in to the heroine's journey, which is really about a path to growth and self-discovery. But we couldn't do the heroine's journey without also doing its counterpart, the hero's journey, which is out in the world, confronting the dragons, the evildoers, and overcoming trials and everything. And we love these stories, right? We have trials and challenges in our own lives. And that's why some of this is so resonating, right? We need mentors. We need a path forward. And so, anyway, it's going to be a fun discussion. Matthew Thornberry is here again. He was actually here before when we talked about, I don't know, you'll have to check out that episode. It was really good, but he's always fun. He actually has a show in Albuquerque that he does, which he wants to invite me on. He just hasn't realized it yet. So grab your Texas-sized beverage. Currently obsessed with lattes, but you may have a Dr. Pepper, a Lone Star, or a sweet tea. And I'm going to talk to you about our sponsor, which is Gibb Insurance Services. We actually talk a lot about the hero's journey here because our clients are the heroes of the story. We're here to be your Obi-Wan Kenobi. We're here to help you navigate any kind of trial or challenge that you may be experiencing. We're better at handling insurance trials and stuff, but we'll help you as much as we can. Whether you're trying to protect your family, your car, your home, your business, we are ready to walk with you on that journey every step of the way. So you can go to giveagencydallas.com to request quotes, get more information, all that good jazz. Okay, now, oh yeah, we've got an insurance tip of the week too, so stick around to the end for that. Okay, you got your beverage? Because it's time. On with the show. All right, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
My name is Matthew Thornbury. I make media. I've been doing it professionally for 25 years. Currently, my regular 9 to 5, I am a senior video editor for Pillar 4 Media, and I make movies. If you've ever been to a movie theater where they have a junket interview at the beginning, you've probably seen me having cut those, and I do graphics for them, all sorts of stuff.
We haven't talked about, but your background with the fish, I could watch that all day.
Oh, I have a playlist on YouTube that is probably like 100 videos deep of different backgrounds with different relaxing music for sleep or for Zoom calls. And they're all kind of coded to specific months and like I have some for early summer, some for late summer, definitely some just for October.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, your video job just kind of came out all at once. So this is the second time I've had you on my podcast.
Yeah,
so thank you for coming back.
Thank you. I miss working with you. I really do.
We worked together for a long time. That was
fun. We did. You were a lot of fun.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, I appreciate that you came back to talk about the hero's journey with me today, which I love. So let's just jump in, shall we?
Yeah.
What is the hero's journey?
Well, okay, so the hero's journey basically comes from Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, published in, I think, 1958. And it's basically taking a look at common mythologies and basically saying, hey, we've been telling the same story forever. And it's basically the monotype where you where you take a hero, a young person, they're removed from their home and they go on a journey, and then there's an older wise person, usually like a wizard or something, and they help them through their journey. They encounter like a rogue and usually a princess, and they have to save the day. And it's basically variations of every story we've basically been telling for millennia.
I have a screenwriter friend who I said that to once. I said,
they're all basically the same stories. And he got really upset. He was like, it is not the same story, but you can definitely follow. There is an outline of events that happen and similar type of characters along the way.
Yeah, I mean, there's also like the whole, there's only been 6 different types of stories ever told, right? And that's basically just reducing things to their absolute base. Not saying that every story is exactly the same, but they all have very common themes. Like 95% of American cinema, there is a heterosexual love story at the center of it, right? It's just kind of how these things work. And it's while you can do variations on it, I think that it's really important to know these bases, because it's not just these stories that we tell for entertainment, but you can kind of find the same themes in, mythology and religious tales. And it's just, it kind of is a nice way of summing up the human experience and saying, hey, all of these things we kind of have in common, And I, as a writer, I understand why your friend could be a little upset about that or offended. And it's like, oh no, my stuff's original. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you're writing a horror story, right, there are only so many different ways of doing that,
So let's talk about, one of the most famous used examples of the hero's journey is
the Star Wars. Yeah.
Star Wars, right?
Star Wars.
So, which Star Wars are we going to use for these examples? The first?
The 2 that I would probably say, one as in the absolute base of what the hero's journey is Episode 4, A New Hope, which was just Star Wars when it came out. Before
right,
we had
it was technically the first one,
right?
But yes, before the prequels.
And then I would say you need to talk about The Last Jedi when you talk about how the modern interpretation of the hero's journey is to kind of subvert it,
Okay.
But very famously, when George Lucas was at USC, he read The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and he based Star Wars on that. He doesn't hide it. He mentions it. I went to USC and it is taught, and they say, no, he learned it here. This is what he did. And he did it in a very clear-cut way where basically he took the Arthurian legend and he said, let's put it in space. And that's what he did. And it's kind of genius because no one had done it before. And it's kind of amazing. The closest thing probably like that to where they have someone where you're on the hero's journey, but it's completely removed from our reality. Before that would probably be like Wizard of Oz.
Interesting. Okay, so let's go through the steps if we can.
Okay.
What's step 1?
Oh, well, now I got to look it up because I haven't read it in forever.
I know most of them, but I sometimes get the orders mixed up. And then sometimes, and I'm jumping ahead, but that's okay. Sometimes it's interesting that I always pay attention to The Dark Knight Before the Storm, which is basically the love scene in the movie. Sometimes it doesn't show up in some people's hero's journey, right? Like some people leave it out, some people leave it in. But I think number 1 is the hero's called, right?
Or is it it's the call to adventure, right?
Call to adventure.
The call to adventure. Basically, the hero is at their house, they're in their home, their safe space, and something from outside beckons them.
Yes.
Whether it's Frodo needing to destroy the ring or whatever. Something says,
come out of your safe space.
Right. You have to leave your house and go out into the woods where it's scary and you're going to experience things you haven't experienced before.
The call to adventure, number 1. Okay.
Right. Then you have the supernatural aid. And if you're going with Star Wars, I mean, it's Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan.
The first thing that Luke does when he leaves his home, he goes to find R2. R2's run off, and he goes to find R2, and he runs into some sand people, and he basically kind of gets killed. And Obi-Wan shows up, heals him, and That's his supernatural aid, and now he has his mentor.
So is the refusal of the call tied in with the call to adventure?
Yeah, because it's...
Or is it peppered in?
I think that you can't... You have the call to adventure, but it's not compelling if the hero's just like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay, right. Because
Right.
they're like, no, I can't do this.
Right.
I'm not that person. I'm not the hero. I'm
right.
not.
You have to have some kind of conflict. Otherwise, I'll quote a writing professor of mine, no one wants to watch a movie where
everything goes right.
That takes place in the happy town where all the happy people live and nothing bad ever happens.
The Matrix. Yeah. Matrix has to follow the hero's journey, doesn't it?
Very much so.
Because Neo is like, I'm not the one. One.
He's the one, right?
But he's not. But he doesn't believe it.
It's funny that when you take a look at the most successful examples of people adapting the hero's journey, they don't do it in a subtle way. You know, you have Neo, the one, and with Frodo, it's like, hey, you got to go do this thing. Oh, I don't want it. No, you got to go do this thing.
Right,
and it's literally a wizard telling him to do it.
Right, and these heroes are not typical heroes. There's
right.
Frodo, who's small. There's
right.
Luke, who is completely not likable as a character. He's so whiny in the beginning of the movies.
Well, he's a kid, and he's upset because he's stuck where he doesn't want to be, and he's just not happy with his place in life and the call to adventure. The first thing he says is like, I can't leave my uncle and my aunt.
No, I can't go.
But then he finds out they've been killed by the Empire. It's like, well, now I got no choice. I have to go.
There went my excuse.
Right.
Okay, so call to adventure, and then you go meet the supernatural or the mentor, right? I've seen it both ways.
Right, supernatural aid / mentor, and they're usually kind of one and the same.
They're the ones that give you the help. They're like, here's what you have to do. Mm-hmm. Here's the blah, blah, blah. So Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah.
Would Lawrence Fishburne be the mentor? I mean, obviously they
100%. 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
So Lawrence Fishburne is the mentor in The Matrix.
And he teaches him how to use his special abilities. And when he first meets Neo doesn't know how to... Like, he says, I know Kung Fu, but then Morpheus very quickly dispatches him.
Right.
And when he's leaning over breathing, he goes, you think that's air you're breathing? And you're like, oh, okay. And that kind of helps him to process what he has to do on this hero's journey. It's almost the exact same scene as Luke failing with the droid when they're on the Millennium Falcon, and then he's like, no, you have to reach out with your feelings. And yeah, that's the supernatural aid coming from the mentor.
All right, so what's the next step after supernatural aid?
Challenges and temptations.
Challenges and temptations.
Right around the threshold. That happens after the threshold of change, right?
Right. You have to cross into the new world, right? You have to choose. Neo takes the pill. Luke leaves. Frodo leaves the Shire. So you have to choose to leave your safe space.
Right. And then you have the challenges and temptations. And if you want to even take the first Star... Because the first Star Wars is almost like the first act of this, but if it's basically, we've got to go to rescue the princess, but we finally get to Alderaan, it's not there, and then we see the Death Star and they bring us on board, so we have to hide, and it's all of the fun plot stuff that we like to watch. Yeah.
Things This is the beginning, middle of the movie, roughly, right?
It's the biggest chunk of the beginning of the second act. Yeah.
Right, where you're getting involved in the adventure and, the excitement is building. And then...
We have the revelation, which is death, the abyss, death, rebirth. For things like The Matrix, that's kind of obvious. It's when Neo literally dies. Again, they don't hide it. For something like the original Star Wars, it's not really Luke's death, it's Obi-Wan's death, and that is Luke's lowest point. I mean, right afterwards, the princess, who again has been kidnapped and tortured, is now comforting him, right? And he for all we know, he's known Ben Obi-Wan briefly, very briefly, but yet he's distraught, and that's his lowest point, and that's
So
when you...
Yes, when all is lost. This is the
Yep.
point of the movie when you think they won't win.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
Right, and for Lord of the Rings, I'm guessing that's probably when Frodo gets stabbed by Shelob, the giant spider, because it looks like, oh, well, he's been stabbed and poisoned. He's catatonic. He's been taken by the orcs. We're in Mordor, and he doesn't even have his mithril vest anymore.
And he and Sam are fighting. Everything seems all seems lost. Now, is this where Dark Knight Before the Storm? Like, when's the love scene happen? It happens before or after this? It does, and every time it's like
right. Well, so that's a funny thing because there's not really a lot of that in
Joseph Campbell's stuff.
Well, yeah, but like if you're talking about Star Wars specifically, and even Frodo, there's not a whole lot of the romance.
There's not
with
the
them.
official love scene, right? But you talked
Right.
about Leia comforting Luke. That is a love scene, not
right. But at
not
the
a sex
time, we
scene,
also
but-
don't know that that's his sister.
yeah.
So
thank God, right?
Right. Yeah.
But it is
Yeah.
the. It doesn't have to show up as actual, let's say, straight up intercourse, although lots of times it is. But
Right.
it is because Frodo and Sam are reunited right after
Right.
that, right?
Exactly.
Like they are together. They're going to try
right. And
one more time.
and that moment of tenderness where you realize there are some feelings between these people in the original Star Wars would be that scene where Leia is comforting Luke, and then for the Matrix, Neo is literally dead.
Yes.
And she's like, "You have to be the one because the Oracle said I'd fall in love with the one, and I'm in love with you." And
Yes.
I just gotta say, when you talk about, anytime you just talk about the Matrix, it comes across as the cheesiest movie, and then you watch it, and you're like, "No, this is one of the greatest things ever put to film."
The Wachowskis put together a really great story. I was a
They
huge
did.
fan of it. I watched
They
it
did.
so many times.
And quick aside, I the latest one, the Revelations, I love. I absolutely, most people hate it, but I love it because it's kind of punk rock in the way it says we don't want to make a reboot or a remake the way everyone does right now, so we're going to do it our own way before you mess it up.
Interesting. Yeah. The Wachowskis have put out some very interesting things since The Matrix. I've watched a couple different. What was it? Sense8. I kind of loved Sense8.
Yeah, the in terms of movies, Cloud Atlas is probably like their biggest swing. That one is there's something there because when I first watched it, I didn't know how I felt about it, but the thing is, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it, and that's always a sign that it did something right. You know, and then they did right after that. They produced right after the first Matrix movies, they produced what was it? V for Vendetta, and that's a lot of fun and way too relevant.
Does it follow the hero's journey as well, you think? Or did they deviate on that one?
It kind of does. Except, when typically, just because it's been this way for thousands of years, because usually guys are the ones doing the writing, the hero is usually a young male. In this case, it's a young female reporter.
Interesting.
Or not reporter. I think she just works at the news station. I haven't seen the movie in a while, but and then they did what was it? Speed Racer, which has it's
not
gained
familiar.
its fandom, but
Okay.
People did not like it at the time.
All right. Okay. Back to the hero's journey.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. I
So
led you there.
after the Revelation Death Abyss thing, you have the transformation, and that's when Neo realizes he can, see.
He is the one.
Yeah, he's the one. He can control the Matrix. For Luke, that has to be when he's piloting down the trench and he starts to hear Obi-Wan, and he turns off his navigational computer and his targeting computer, and he uses the Force.
He's no longer that whiny kid that can't leave.
Right. And
he is the one that's going to save the day. He has transformed. He has taken all of the things and the trials and...
Yes, and while it works just as the original Star Wars, if you take a look at the original trilogy as one big story, the difference in Luke when you first see him saying, I was going to Tosche Station to pick up some power converters, right? You compare that to him in Return of the Jedi, and I still say that Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi is the most confident character ever put to screen. He just shows up calm and cool. He's like, oh, yeah, it looks like you got us in a pretty tight spot. Are you sure you don't want to rethink this? Because it's going to go bad for you. And everyone's like, you're going to die. And, like, he just takes everybody down. And he confronts Vader, beats him, looks at the Emperor, throws his lightsaber away. He's like, no, I'm cool. I'm a Jedi. You got nothing on me. And, like, it's such a drastic change. It is such a drastic change, which really sets up what they do in The Last Jedi. But we'll get to that.
Okay. So after the transformation, there is...
Atonement. Yeah. I don't know how... I think a lot of times we kind of skip over the atonement and go right to the return and the gift part.
That's where I was headed. I forgot about atonement.
Yeah, because... but I don't think you really get that in Star Wars. You don't, because lately, there's a rush to get through Act 2 and Act 3. But if you want to go to the return and the gift, like, Neo's gift is now he gets to fly and control the Matrix however he wants.
What is atonement, though, before we jump to the fun one?
That's the thing. I don't know how you... Because the three that we've selected, I don't know if there really is atonement.
What is the example of... but what is atonement? So it's like that moment of you realize everything that you've done before you go back, or...
Yeah, it's where you're trying to make things right by everybody, right? Before you get the gift at the end. You can't just skip over that. But again, I don't see it used as much as the other part. I think people kind of...
I can almost imagine it as like literally a moment in a movie with some music in the background that's supposed to signify everything that has just happened.
Yeah.
They're using the movement to be like where everything that we've come, all the costs and things that you've lost along the way to get to this moment, whether you've lost friends or anything else. It's that moment in the movie. There's just like, yes, I've won.
Right.
But there's a sense of like, oh.
And I think the one that probably gets that across best is Lord of the Rings.
Honestly, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. Because, first of all, that movie takes about 20 minutes to end. Because you're also ending 3 movies that are each like 4 hours.
Yeah.
But no, that one takes the time, and actually one of my favorite moments in that entire series is when they've all returned to the Shire and they're at the Prancing Pony or the Green Dragon. I'm sorry, they're at the Green Dragon. And they're just kind of looking around and they're about to have their beers and everyone else is normal and they look at each other and they're like,
we're changed forever.
Yeah, we're different. And then, Samwise, the one regret he had was not telling that girl that he was interested in her, and he does, and they get married. But the atonement there is everyone who was a ring bearer eventually has to leave Middle-earth. And not only does Bilbo have to leave, but Frodo leaves too. And they leave this out of the movies, but in the book, after... his wife has died and his kids are grown, Samwise sails off into the west as well.
Interesting.
So yeah, their atonement is basically paying the price for having been a ring bearer.
Right.
But Star Wars is more like, okay, that stuff's not as fun.
Let's move on.
Let's get to the fun stuff. Yeah.
Okay, and so the next one is
the
return
gift,
with the elixir, the gift, We've got it.
And Star Wars, they literally have a medal ceremony where they're standing, and for some reason, a princess of a planet that no longer exists, so she doesn't really have a kingdom, is placing medals around the heroes' necks.
Bygones.
Yeah,
we don't have,
But it's like, and again, Neo in the Matrix, he now gets to control the Matrix however he wants, and he flies away. And for people who've been watching the last 2 hours of like all this nerd stuff just come to life, like, well, what else can he do? Well, he gets to fly. The dude gets to fly. Yeah.
Interesting. So what's you alluded to this a moment ago, you said The Last Jedi. What was it you were going to say about The Last Jedi, which is different from the other Star Wars?
So The Last Jedi it is kind of divisive. If you've ever been online, it might be the most divisive Star Wars thing ever put out. People either love it or they hate it. And the first time I saw it, I hated it. Absolutely hated it. I went and reviewed it for a television show and did not like it. And I couldn't put my finger on it, but I'm like, well, I can't believe they did this, this, and this. I hated it. And turned in my review, and I got a text saying, hey, a nephew of mine had been killed in a mass shooting.
Oh.
The Texas Cowboys game day shooting a few years ago, where a bunch of people were killed at a house while watching the Cowboys.
Oh, gosh.
He was there.
Oh, no.
And he was a huge Star Wars fan. My wife had won a Star Wars laptop on a cruise, and we didn't need it, so we had given it to him. And it was like had Darth Vader on it, and it was a cool thing. But he loves Star Wars, and I got a text message from someone in the family saying, hey, we're all going to get together and go see it at 11:45 tonight. I had been up for like a day already, and I'm like, well, this theater's 25 minutes away, and I'm not going to get home until like 3. I'm not going to do it. And my wife said, you need to go. I'm like, okay. So I went.
You were called.
I was called.
You tried to refuse.
Exactly.
Leave
and
your
the weirdest
home.
thing was I met a wizard on the way. That was just crazy.
Okay.
But I left the theater, and I had seen the movie in a completely different light. And, I'm 41. The first Star Wars movie I remember seeing was Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi Luke is my favorite version of Luke. My wife is a huge Star Wars fan. That's her favorite version of Luke. And I realized my issues with the movie were that Luke wasn't the same person that we saw in Return of the Jedi. Now, did it matter that it had been 30 years? No, I still wanted to see Luke. I wanted Luke out there with his lightsaber and fighting everybody. And I didn't get that. I got a guy who was kind of done with things, disillusioned. He didn't believe in the Jedi anymore. He thought they should just go away. He thought they did more harm than good. And I realized, so what happens when you take a character who for the last 30 years we've only seen as that last snippet of him, where he's in Return of the Jedi, he's in all black, he's got the cool green lightsaber, and he's the most confident person ever in a movie. And that's how he's been in our cultural conscious for the last 30 years. And all of a sudden he shows up as a hermit, and he's like, all that stuff that you thought I cared about, I don't. And once I started thinking about it, I'm like, wait, this character had two people who taught him how to be a Jedi, Obi-Wan and Yoda. And what happened when they lost their fights? They went and hid. They cut themselves off. I'm like, oh, well, that kind of fits in with what they did, huh? And then it's like, well, he said that the Jedi failed because of their dogma, and he's right about that. And he even says in the movie, what do you expect? That I take out my laser sword and face off against the whole New Order on my own? And that's Rian Johnson, the writer-director, talking right to the audience. saying, is this what you want? You want to play with your little action figure some more? No, we're going to make this a real character. And a person who is that confident, who starts up his own Jedi school and fails so completely that he tries to kill his own nephew. It's not like he lost a fight to the Emperor and went and hid. He almost killed his own nephew, and that is a huge failure, having come from someone who was the most confident character we've ever seen. That is the biggest fall you can imagine. Wow, so that makes sense. He really doesn't want to be part of this. And how does he decide to fight back? In the most Jedi way. He's not even there. He doesn't swing his lightsaber. He lets them attack him, lets the good guys get away, and he fights through passive resistance. And then he gets his closure by having sacrificed himself for the greater good. And he looks off into a binary sunset. And the first time we saw him, he was looking off into that binary sunset. And when we first see him look off, he's longing. He wants to go out there and do something. And now it's his return home. And he's comfortable with what's happened. And that's when I realized, oh, Rian Johnson's playing another level here. Like, he's doing something that people weren't ready for. And 10 years from now, people are going to say, oh, that's one of the best ones next to Empire. But I don't think people were ready to have their character that they've loved so much, having been static for 30 years, have such a big change. And especially when he is the epitome of the hero's journey.
Well, that's my question. In The Last Jedi, does he continue to be the hero? Because he kind of dabbles in, I'm the wizard.
He is the wizard, yeah. But
he's also coming home. Like, it also puts his storyline kind of to bed, doesn't it?
Okay, so like one of the things I love about The Last Jedi is that it's very much about how stories affect us. And Rian Johnson, the guy who wrote and directed it, guess where he went to school? USC.
Yeah.
And USC kind of hammers in this whole hero's journey. You got to read Joseph Campbell, right? So he's very aware of this. And he knows, well, we've already started a new series with a young protagonist. And, you know, she got some aid in the first one from Han, but that's not really like the supernatural aid. That's not the wizard. Well, now she gets the wizard. But you know what? Let's take this time and let's end Luke's journey properly, because we didn't end it before. We just kind of left it as he will have more adventures. So let's end it properly. So he did both. And the whole thing about Last Jedi is the importance of myth, the importance of stories. So much so, the movie, when I first saw the movie, I thought it was going to end where they're all next to each other on the Falcon in that wide shot. And that's the stereotypical ending shot for a Star Wars movie. It's like, it's like, no, but it keeps going. And then it shows those kids from Canto Bight, the slave kids. And what are they doing? They're playing. They have these figures and they're telling the story of Luke Skywalker facing off against the New Order. And they have a Luke Skywalker action figure and they're playing with it, one that they've made. And the kid goes outside, grabs the broom using the Force, not even knowing he's a Force user, looks up at the stars, sees the ships. He has the rebel ring, and he looks down at it. And then, like every kid since 1977, takes the broom and then slightly holds it up, because now that's his lightsaber, right? The story of Luke Skywalker being a hero has inspired him. And the whole point of this is that it's cyclical, and it's the most quoted thing from George Lucas. It's like it's poetry. It's cyclical. It rhymes, right? Like everyone does that impression, and it's because it is. It's meant to be cyclical. The whole point is you're never going to be able to stop evil. You're going to have to fight it. People will always have to fight it, and these stories stay with us, and they inspire people to do the right thing. And that's Luke's part in this. And it's beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful, and I think a lot of people missed it because, like he said, they wanted him to go out with the laser sword and cut things down. And I think as people kind of get older and kind of move away from it and look at it in a new light, they're going to see there's probably no better way of ending his story than what they did in Last Jedi.
Very
Not
nice.
like I've thought about this at all.
No. Well, you talk about, I think, the importance of stories, right? Like knowing the hero's journey can both, as you start to learn it and as you start to watch movies and you're like, oh, this is that step, this is that step. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, I know where we are, how much longer we have in the movie. It can both distract and enhance, but
Yeah.
the importance of stories to humanity is really...
It's how we pass information down. It's how we teach kids right and wrong. Like, everyone is taught, like almost every kid is taught those fables about the boy who cried wolf and things like that. It's a way of taking big concepts and boiling them down to a place where we can all understand them. Because you have to teach, right and wrong. You have to teach morality some way, right? And this is how we do it. We've been basically saying the same 5 or 6 things since we've learned how to tell stories, and it's kind of for a reason, because these are things that resonate with us at a very deep level.
Well, if people want to find you, how do they find you? You got to tell us about your TV show too.
Yeah, if you're in Albuquerque, you can watch it on television. I have a podcast called Matt Men Movies Podcast. We're on Spotify and kind of everywhere you find podcasts, Apple and all that. But we are on Instagram and TikTok at Matt Men Movies Pod. We have links to where you can watch our show online there. We're on YouTube. I'm not sure what our YouTube is right now because our first one got taken down.
Oh.
With no reason. They said we were reposting things, but they didn't give a which one or what, and we didn't repost anything. Everything we did was original. We didn't have clips for anything up, so I don't know why. We just got deleted. So we had to start a new one. Not sure where we are there, but I'm at Media Arts Talent on Twitter, X.
And so you guys discuss movies. Like recent movies, current movies.
We talk about everything. We usually start with some news about the industry as a whole. We almost always talk about Netflix and the good and the bad of it. I usually rant about stuff like movie theaters that are closing down. By the way, the Bruin and the Fox in Westwood both just closed, which is a really bad sign because if we can't keep theaters in LA from closing that have been around forever, like what good... Yeah. Like what chance does anyone else have? But we talk about all sorts of movies. Our latest one, we talked about if something like Pulp Fiction is still relevant, why it was relevant in the first place. But we also talked about Maxine and Twisters, so it's all sorts of stuff.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us. Now I'm literally, you just talked about those movies, and I'm like, can I do Hero's Journey with Pulp Fiction? Pretty sure I probably can. I've got to figure out which storyline I'm going to do it on. But
it'd have to be Butch.
Anyway, thank you again.
Thank you,
Butch.
I always have a good time talking with Matt. I've known Matt for a long, long time, and it's good to connect with him. This week, we're going to talk about home insurance, and a lot of this is geared for new home buyers. So, number one, roof condition is so important right now. There are many carriers, after 15 years, they're not offering replacement cost anymore. And it can be hard to even get coverage if your roof is not in good shape. And they may not even offer you a policy. They may not even give you actual cash value. Number two, wind and hail deductibles are going to 2% in many, many places across the state, which is 2% of the dwelling cost, which can be a pretty big cost if you have to have a roof claim. So you got to be aware of that. Number 3, do not have a lapse in coverage. It's real bad. Carriers won't offer coverage if you've had a lapse, so make sure that there is no gaps whatsoever, no gaps. Number 4, water claims are kind of a big deal. There's a human element to water claims, right? Like, not in all cases, but maybe you could have checked your water heater. Maybe you could have put the little devices underneath your sink that notify you if there's a leak. So even one water claim, some carriers are not offering coverage, and $0 water claims are a big deal. So you kind of want to make sure that it's going to be more than your deductible if you're going to claim it. And there you have it. Kind of makes me think about, you remember that movie Hustle and Flow with Terrence Howard, and the main song is It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp? Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about home insurance sometimes. I'm obviously not a pimp, but doesn't mean I can't like the song, right? Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Please go to giveagencydallas.com to connect with us, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.